buying movie tickets,
Economics.
going to restaurants.
Big question mark is the GBA going to do exactly the same
Place
thing?
cash.
Good morning, Dr. Law, ladies and gentlemen, our dear members. I'm delighted to welcome all of you to this webinar on the recently announced employment support scheme. Today, we are very honored to have Dr. Law Chi-kwong, Secretary for the Labor and Welfare, and Sam C., the scheme processing agents from PwC, have come to the chamber to brief the members on the details of this scheme. I'm sure we all agree that Hong Kong is facing unprecedented tests. COVID-19 has badly hit our economy and putting jobs and business at risk. In the chamber, the recent survey conducted this month on the impact of the virus, we found that about 1/3 of our respondents said their business would only be able to survive up to 6 months. So this figure is extremely worrying. Therefore, we are pleased that the government has responded swiftly, rolling out several rounds of relief measure worth a total of around 288 billion in the past couple of months. In particular, the employment support scheme, which help employer pay a portion of their wages bill, is considered to be the most useful relief measure by our survey respondents. This scheme helped stabilize the job market to a certain extent and will slow the rise in unemployment. Without further ado, I would like to pass the mic to Jeffrey Lam, our LegCo representative, to moderate this session.
Thank
Please.
you, George.
Thank you.
CK, Sam, and members. Due to the Sino-US trade war, outbreak of coronavirus, businesses are faced with cancellation of orders and halt in production lines. I talked to CE earlier how to help companies to pay salaries in order to save businesses. Peter, our chairman, and also several of us from Hong Kong General Chamber of Commerce went to speak to CE again in early April. I appreciate that the government, shortly after our meetings, came up with a wage subsidy scheme to help business stay afloat and keep jobs. Well, we have today Dr. the Honorable Law Chi-kwong, Secretary for Labor and Welfare, and Sam C., Employment Support Scheme Processing Agent, as our speaker. Well, CK and I has known each other for a while before he joined the government. We have a lot of exchange in days of MPF and many others. As you all know, CK was a LegCo member from 1995 to 1997, and again from 1998 to 2004. CK has extensive experience in the public sector, and Sam is a partner at PricewaterhouseCoopers. I'm sure they would be able to give us detailed information regarding the scheme. I know many members have questions, and I actually, before today, I have received many. So maybe I would like to first invite members to type questions you may have. I may not be able to read everyone in detail, but I'll try to consolidate because I'm sure some of the questions will be very similar. Without further ado, I would like to ask our speaker, first our secretary, to brief us on the scheme. CK.
Thank
please.
you. Thank you, Jeff. Jeffrey, I will have a PowerPoint to present some of the basic framework of the scheme. Sam with me will be helping out to answer some of the questions if this is a bit too technical for me to answer. As the scheme is called Employment Support Scheme, okay, the objective focus on the whole theme about employment support. The key is how to keep our labor force intact and hope to maintain the relationship between the employer and the employees so that when the economy starts to revive, then the employers can grab the opportunity to rise up again instead of having to start the business and to do the recruitment. So the whole idea is to keep that employment as far as possible. So I have been telling employers in the past couple of weeks that the government is wanting to help the employers so that they can help the society to maintain employment. So that is a mutual kind of relationship between the government and then the employer and the society. So that is the whole focus of the scheme. The scheme is divided into two tranches. The idea of having two tranches is basically, firstly, we want to reduce the amount of administration. Although we want to cover the salary payment of employers for 6 months, but making 6 different applications will be too tedious. But this is a wholly brand new system. It's not available in Hong Kong. It's not available anywhere in the world that is having similar labor market situation here in Hong Kong. So we designed a system which is brand new, no experience, and there's no accurate way of predicting how the employers and employees will react and the subsequent behaviors. So the best thing is to divide it into 2 tranches so we can learn from the experience of the first tranche to sort of adjust whatever we need to for the second tranche. And having 2 tranches only, so we can actually help the employers a little bit more by giving out 3 months of wage subsidies in one block. So that will also help employers to deal with some of the cash flow problems. So, and because the whole scheme will be well over $40 billion for the first tranche. For the second tranche, again, will be $40 billion. And we want to make sure that we can give out that money to help the employers as soon as possible. So the design that I'm going to describe is trying to be as simple as possible, and hopefully that the processing can be done within actually I would say weeks, so we can hand out the money. There are 2 commitments that employers in applying for this scheme, the ESS, have to make. One is there will be no redundancy during the subsidy period. Now, let me stress again, there's no redundancy during the subsidy period. There may have already been redundancy in March, in April, and in May. But the undertaking is to hoping that employers can at least, during that period of time, they have no redundancy. Okay? There are different interpretations of redundancy. I'm not going to spell the details, but basically, the idea of redundancy is you dismiss your staff, have no intention of filling up the vacancy. That is what we call redundancy. There's also some kind of downsizing without redundancy, like you allow the natural turnover to take place, but then without replacing the vacancy. But that is downsizing, but not necessarily means redundancy. Okay. The same part is really to spend all the government wage subsidies on paying the wages to the employees. I want to stretch at this particular point. The idea is really to help the employers so that they can keep the employees. In application of the first tranche, I will spell later what does it really means in terms of spending all the government wage subsidy on paying wages to the employees. But the spirit is really helping the employers to help keeping their staff. Okay, so well, to keep your employees, you can also have to keep them to a certain level of satisfaction. Otherwise, there can be a lot of disputes, and that will affect business and also affect the whole economy. And that's what we don't want to happen. I'll explain briefly what we mean by keeping this pledge under the scheme. there are a lot of questions about eligibility, whether I can or we can apply for the scheme, and we have these circumstances, we have some redundancy this month, can we apply for it? The eligibility was, in fact, it's very simple. As long as you have an MPF account for the employer and your employees, and then you already have an occupational retirement schemes, what we call the also schemes. As long as you have this for your employees, then you're eligible for the ESS. Okay, but the important part is because we announced the scheme in early April, so to avoid the possibility of any misuses or abuses of the system, the whole system relies primarily on historical records. So there is no manipulations, so to speak, on this particular scheme. The conditions is you have an also scheme or you have an MPF account on or before the 31st of March. Okay? Because we heard from trustees that there are quite a number of new companies setting up in April, setting up accounts, and we are not very sure they are really for the whole thing. Definitely, if they really have a new business in April, I definitely congratulate them. But the whole idea of this scheme is really to help the employers to face the difficult times so they can endure and then come back. Okay. This part is very straightforward for self-employed persons. I guess for employers, this is very simple. Basically, because there are a lot of self-employed persons, so this ESS overcover them and give them a one-off grant of $7,500 for those who have an account active and still open on or before the 31st of March. And that's very straightforward. For the first tranche, this is a very important slide. And the part that we should always bear in mind, to calculate or to work out the amount of subsidy that an employer can receive from the ESS, you can choose one particular month among December last year, January, February, and March this year as the specified month. And that specified month is used for calculating the amount of subsidy. In fact, what it really means is that whatever you have done in the past couple of weeks after March, it will not affect the amount of subsidy you will be able to receive in June, July, and August. So what you have done actually in December to March this year will define how much you will receive. So they're saying people, oh, they will immediately fire the senior persons and hire junior persons, but definitely it will not affect the amount of subsidy that they are going to receive. We have already started the process now, and you can always click into the website www.es.gov.hk, and you can already start the whole process. I guess some of the audience today might have already applied for it already. For the employers, we hope that we can achieve this target, that for most of the applications that we can hand out the money, disperse the money within 3 to 4 weeks time. I have to say that it really depends on the situation. For those who have MPF systems or MPF only, the processing should be simpler, and will definitely there shouldn't be any problem for us to complete the process within 3 to 4 weeks time. For the also scheme, it may take a little bit longer because there is no singular legal framework for each and every also scheme. Some of them are straightforward, but some can be complicated. Some are offered by some different types of trustees, or some are self-administered. So they can be of complications. So it will take a little bit more time. For self-employed, it will be very straightforward. The process of application is primarily on electronic form. In order to help you to expedite the process, the best thing is to read some of the instructions, you get some of the documents prepared, and then it normally only take around 10 to 15 minutes and you complete the whole application process. But for those who do not have those records readily at hand, they may take a little bit longer. As I read the news, one take almost an hour because they have to find out the documents and so forth before they can complete the whole process. The whole process, the important part is to authorize our processing agent to receive the MPF records from the trustees, which also means that you authorize the trustees to provide the same to the processing agent. And the whole design relies very heavily on this process so that we can speed up the whole thing. Because for the MPF trustees, they will have all the data in electronic form. So it will be just data to data transmission, and our processing agent can therefore be able to complete the whole process as quickly as we can. The important thing is as I mentioned, we rely on historical records, and particularly for MPF schemes, so that the trustees will be able to provide to our processing agent the records, and so that we can work out very quickly. So the employee actually, if you have an MPF account, you don't actually have to get all the data ready, because all you have to do, authorize our processing agent, get it from the trustee, and then we work out the subsidy almost immediately. Okay? And let me take the other part is really that you have to fill in is your business registration or any other registration number you have, like if you are a society registered under society ordinance, or you're actually a body set up by statute. Definitely you need those documents demonstrating that you are the guy who are making the application. And you have to provide information about the trustees and subsequently the authorization. And the most important part is the participation number of that MPF, okay, that you have to fill in subsequently. The other part is the bank account number. In our past experience, we know that people are not very good in putting accurate bank account numbers. And therefore, you will be in the processing process, you will have to submit it twice. But the most important part, you have to scan a document showing the bank statement. We don't care about the transaction, the bank statement. All we care is whether the name is correct and the bank number is correct. And the most important thing is it won't go into the wrong person's account, okay? Because accidentally someone know your company got some kind of record of your trustee, records provided to the employers, and then they can make an application and put their own bank account number as the recipient of that amount. We have to make sure. And we have to make sure, and the best arrangement will be the name of that bank account number is the same as the one who are making the application, like in the trustee information, so they will be matched. So ensure it is the right person making the application. But just in case for some of the SME, I guess they may not have the same, but then our process agent may have to double check with the applicant, and that will take some more time in the whole thing. If you already have an account with the same name, that will make things very much simpler. The information required, except for those who have a also scheme, will little bit more, apart from the business registration, also scheme operations, the exemption number, the employer's bank account. They will also have to provide some additional information on the staff income. I'm not going to deal with the details, but basically for the also scheme, you have to provide an additional information. Although some of the also scheme, as I know, they may be managed by another trustee, that will make things simpler, but somehow because the variation in our also schemes require the employer to submit another, basically it's a spreadsheet with serial number of employees and then the relevant income, okay? And then you have to scan some of the documents. I'm not going to spell the details because once you all go to the website, you know that, okay? For the online application, you make all those MPF trustees' names and then the serial number, a participation number of that thing, and you scan the bank statement. Okay, I guess, sorry, by now, most of you will know how that ESS is going to work out. It's basically 50% of the salary with a cap up to a maximum subsidy per employee, $9,000 per month. I guess everyone knows this by now. The 65, the reason I want to spell this out is because for the 65 is perhaps a bit complicated. Firstly, those 65 are covered as long as they have an MPF account. So if you have an active account of your 65 plus, and such a person are shown on the records of the trustee, then they will be counted. So the whole thing is, there can be complication for this one is because for the 65 plus, some of the employee only provide the amount of information related to the voluntary contribution, okay? And they may not have provided information related to the relevant income. And so we will basically assume, so to speak, assume that for those who are 65, if you're only providing us the information about the voluntary contribution in the record of the trustees, we'll just simply multiply that amount by 10 times, assuming it's 5% of your relevant income. So multiply that by 10 times with 50% of the relevant income, okay? The whole construction of the whole process, we try to reduce the amount of information we have to seek from the employers from time to time, okay? So we just pay on the record and we work out the subsidy for the 65 plus. So 65 plus are basically covered as long as they have an account. There's a little bit tricky about this 65 plus thing because for many of them, because they are 65, so they have no mandatory contribution, so some companies do not have such an account for them. But then in fact, you can always bear in mind this point. It is not mandatory, but you can do the voluntary contribution. And in terms of headcount, later on, I'll talk about headcounts. And then you can always provide voluntary contribution of the 65 plus, and they will become one of the headcounts that we will take into account. Okay, this is a very important part. So let me go quickly for the first tranche, the commitment that you have to make. Again, this line is very important. The number of employees on payroll in June, July, and August cannot be smaller than the number of employees with or without pay in March 2020. Okay, so again, this is a very important part. The pledge is that the number of employees who have paid on payroll in the 3 months that you receive the subsidy, that number cannot be smaller than the number of employees in March with or without pay. So if you do have employees in March, they have no pay at all, we'll count that number as the number of employees in March. But in June, at that time, you have to ensure they will have pay, okay? So the number we are matching is the number of employees on payroll who have paid in June, July, and August. So if that guy is on no pay leave in March, and even though you may have no work for them in June, you have to pay them a pay leave, okay? Otherwise, that number will not be counted. And that number we have to keep, okay? And that is the whole purpose of the whole scheme in terms of employment support, is to keep people in the job. Not just in the job, but with pay, okay? And all the money that we have given to the employer should be spent on wages. But in operation terms, it basically means that, let's say if the government give the employer $1 million, and if you only pay out your payroll $500,000, we'll claw back the $500,000. Okay. So basically, the whole thing is if you fails to use all the wages in a particular month, that the difference will be clawed back. Okay. For the first tranche, the clawback may not be necessary for the government to ask you to give the money back. As long as you probably, if you have a second tranche application, then we'll just take out that amount from the second tranche. But conceptually, it's still a clawback without asking the employer to sign a check and give it back to the government. Okay, but for the second tranche, it will be something similar, and then clawback will mean actually clawing back the money. Okay. Another thing is about the penalty. If the number of employees on the payroll in June, July, and August each month, okay, is less than the number of staff in March, then they will have a penalty. And then for the first part, the clawback is very simple. We give you the amount of subsidies, and if that amount of subsidy exceeds your total wage bill, the difference will be clawback. The penalty actually depends on two factors. One is depending on the percentage of headcount reduction. And the headcount reduction is related to the difference between the number of employees paid in June, July, and August versus the number of employees with or without pay in March. Okay, and that is the percentage we'll be working out. And there is a penalty percentage, I will describe that, which basically depends on the size of the company. This is a very simple formula. It's the total number of paid and unpaid staff in March minus the total number of paid staff in June, July, and August, respectively, divided by the number of paid and unpaid staff in March, followed by 100%. So it's the percentage of reduction of that particular number. The second factor we factor in is the percentage. We can actually call this a discount or penalty because we do not expect that it is up to 100% control to the employer in terms of turnovers, vacancy, etc. But the amount of control for a bigger company will be a little bit bigger than a micro enterprise for those who have less than 10 person. Because let's say you have only 5 employees, having 2-person turnover, you already have a turnover of 40%. And that can be very substantial, okay? Particularly if unfortunately, one of your staff left who will be leaving in, let's say, the end of May, 31st of May, you may not be able to get back a person within June, okay? But that is already, if you have 5 staff, then you're already 20% turnover. And so we will have a substantial discount for the small and micro enterprise. And for bigger companies, it's not 100%, 80%, okay? Assuming that even for big companies, they may not be able to do that immediately because actually big companies have a lot of rules and procedures in employment. In recruitment. This is just an example. In June, that let's say we are giving you a subsidy of $40,000 per month, and in June you pay out $60,000, so there's no clawback, okay? Because your payroll is bigger than the subsidy, okay? However, you have a reduction in number. Or suppose you only have 5 persons, you have, and in June you have only 3 persons, so will be the amount of subsidy we give you is 40,000. Will be multiplied by 40%. That is the reduction in number, and then by the factor, or the penalty factor, which is 10%. So the penalty for this micro enterprise is not very big. It's only $1,600. The union are criticizing that we are too lenient on that, but I think that is fair. For July, this example shows you that the number of employees, you have kept them, but then somehow, for some reasons, there is a reduction in payroll, and so there will be a callback of $10,000. But because there is no reduction in number, there's no penalty. And for August is fine. Okay, so the next example is a bigger one. I don't spend much time on that. The whole idea again is we'll work on each individual month. Firstly, whether there's any clawback. There's any difference between the money among a subsidy and the amount of payroll. And second factor again is look at the reduction in the number between March and the respective month. Like say in this example, in June you have a reduction in staff number, so there will be a 10% headcount reduction. And this is a big company, so we're 80%, and so that penalty is $400,000. Okay. Out of the subsidy, which is $5 million. Okay, it's not a lot, but it's not a good thing for government to say we have a penalty for that company, and so they try to encourage the employers to keep the number. Okay, the auditing and monitoring mechanism is, I would say, simple, straightforward. The processing agent verify the information submitted by the employers, and when required, will conduct on-site checking at selected employers' organizations. Because our processing agent is a professional firm, and they have experience and knowledge in identifying risk, so it really depends on the risk level of the application, like the amount of information given, like whether it's an also scheme or MPF scheme, and whether the also scheme is managed by an outsider or actually managed by the company itself. All these are factors of consideration about the risk. And when there is a reasonable risk, that our processing agent will conduct on-site checking. So at that time, it will be an arranged meeting, so that the employers can have all the documentation ready for the on-site inspection. What we are going to announce to the public will be the name of employers who have received the subsidy, the total number of employees benefited, and the amount of subsidies received. Okay, this will be open to the public. Because we do not expect to have a very elaborate monitoring mechanism by our processing agent. So we'll leave it to the public, the media, the staff, if they have any complaints. So this transparency of the information they can use. Okay, so this will also, so we'll act on the complaint unless there are very good reasons for us to have actively to make an investigation. Okay, but mostly we'll be relying on complaints. So the staff, the public can all report to us and see what's wrong. And if there are any complaint about labor relationships because of the scheme, they can always approach the labor department. They will handle it. Okay. I have to stress, if you have provide false statements, declaration, etc., it will be a criminal issue. Okay. We have a website for all inquiries, and you can go to the website. We have all these frequently asked Q&A. And you can, perhaps some of the questions may already be answered in the Q&A. We have a hotline and also the email, and these are all available, so you can make detailed inquiries. We also have we have help desk both in Hong Kong, Kowloon, and also in the New Territory. And this help desk will be open in this 3 weeks' time when we have the application opened from 9 to 6 from Monday to Sunday. This is, I was saying, particularly useful for those who who have difficulty of making application online, and the help desk will be able to help them to do so. And after the application period and all the inquiries and things that they can always go to the help desk, and will be open 9 to 6 and Monday to Friday. That's all I want to say. Sam is together with me, although we do have a PowerPoint about the application process, but I will prefer to save that presentation. And so if you have any questions about the application, the technical thing, Sam will help me to answer that.
Well, thank you, CK. And we are very, very happy to have the implementing agent here, Sam. You know, many people have been complaining they can't get through the hotline. So, you know, the first question to you before you make your presentations, can you set up a hotline for our HKGCC members? So, Sam, yours.
Yeah, thank you for the question. So we've looked at the volume in terms of traffic to the call centers. Obviously, we opened the application period on Monday at 7 a.m. and calls were coming in. And in the previous experience of administering a scheme like this, obviously not to this scale, the experience is that the first 3 to 4 days is where the peak of the activity is. And after that, when people are, getting used to what it looks like, what it feels like, have an experience of the website, etc., and, speaking to, colleagues and peers, etc., the call volume will go down. So we have, first of all, scaled up the call agents' capacity in terms of number of calls that we can take. We've also conducted continuous training for the call agents to make sure that first of all, they can refer immediately back to the frequently asked questions on the website. And if not, then the answers that they give to the callers are correct and appropriate. So we have seen a reduction in call traffic yesterday. So we will continue to monitor this. But it looks like things have, similar to other experience, have sort of quiet down a little bit, but obviously something that we will continue to monitor.
Jeffrey,
Okay.
it's up to you. I will save the presentation on the application. So because it's just a demonstration how it goes through, but I guess we'll save more time for Q&A from the members and for members.
Okay. All right, good.
Yes.
So, well, thank you, CK and Sam, for briefing us on the scheme. Hit by so many economic uncertainties, businesses really need support from the government through troubled waters. I want to let you know, members wanted to tell you that we are genuine businessmen or women. We are not thieves. In your presentation, you emphasize on some penalty clause. They are trying very hard to keep their business afloat. They are very concerned about penalties, whether those would end up being a criminal offense or so on and so forth. So questions surrounding that arises. So I will not be able to read out every question, yes, but I have summarized as there are overlap questions. So I'll read a few to you two and hope you try to answer. The first few questions that I've summarized is someone with a MPF or also account resigned voluntarily from company in early June, right at the beginning of the subsidy period. And the employer only manages to find a replacement employee at the end of August, or even after August, just before the first subsidy period. But by then, will not have made MPF contribution or set up an ORSO. Would the replacement employee still be counted as part of the total headcount? Or would the company be penalized for this? Another question which is I asked many times is, if a few employees resign voluntarily from a company in August, it's hard for the employer to fill the position within such short period of time. Would the government handle such cases in a flexible way? Another one is, if employer promise not to lay off employees during the subsidy period, would they still implement no pay leave? Would they still implement no pay leave policy or pay cut? One more, which is I think is related, is if the performance of a particular employee, which they employ just before the period, is really bad, okay, or not up to the employer's satisfaction, can he take this for granted as employers cannot fire him during the subsidy period? So I stop here. So those are the 4 questions I think are quite related. CK or Sam, can you give members an answer to that?
Okay, let me deal with the questions one by one. Well, in any particular month, when we count the number of heads, no matter in, say, January, which you may have chosen as the specified month, or the March that we count the number of employees, or in the subsequent 3 months that you're receiving the subsidy, will be basing on the record of the trustee for the MPF scheme, the records. Let's say if you have a member, your staff member who left in the middle of that particular month, that person you may still have to provide the MPF contributions. So that person as a headcount will appear on the certificate that the trustee provides to a processing agent. Okay, and if you have recruited somebody earlier and then you start contributing MPF in that same month, maybe the latter part of that month, that person will also be counted. Okay, if you have payment salary, that will be counted. So it's based on the record in a month, not on a particular date, but in a month. So whenever we talk about counting heads, pay, without pay, etc., it will be within the month. Okay, so I presume for larger companies, basically the phenomenon of having staff turnover is just natural. So it can happen in January. It can happen in March when we count the numbers. So it equally may happen in June, July, and August. So that's one thing. Okay, so the reason we have that formula for penalty to have a sort of a discount factor, depending on the size of the company, is really judging on the ability for one to control that headcount. Okay, but somehow there is actually, before we designed the system, there was a suggestion that we can have a fixed percentage that or allowance of that reductions, like 5% or 3%, or some even say 10%. But if we haven't considered that particular construction, is because by construction you give that percentage, actually are telling people the percentage of people they can fire. Okay, so that doesn't sounds good. So the most important thing is give you a very transparent formula, and you know that will be a penalty taking out, and you will try. We hope the employers to help the society to maintain the number of employees, and you know that how much, if you fail to do that, will be deducted and coming back to the government. Okay, that is one thing. Second thing, there is a general misunderstanding about MPF contribution. The mandatory contribution requires you to make the contribution within 60 days. If you exceed the 60 days, it will be against the law. So, but most people don't do it in the first month. They do it in the second month. But you can do it in the first month. So it depends on how much you want to provide such information to your trustees. As I said, I like the 65 plus is saying there's no mandatory requirement for contribution, but you can still provide them with a voluntary contribution. So somehow in calculation of the 60 days, in fact, when you make a contribution, let's say in the second month, you have to actually, the total amount of contribution include the first day that they're employed. So theoretically, on the first day of employment, they already have a MPF entitlement, quote unquote. Okay, that is the conceptual part. So you can always flexibly deal with these issues by making earlier contributions and making opening account in a relatively shorter day instead of waiting for the 60 days to happen. So I hope that deals with the whole issue about the idea about flexibility. Okay, the calculation is basically based on headcount, and you have to manage that. And I suppose employers have a whole lot of method to deal with that issue. Okay, the no pay leave thing for us in June, July, and August, we count them as long as they have paid within that month. We don't actually collect individual information. In fact, we don't even know who they are. We will not be collecting information like the ID, the names. Because if we have to do that, we have to ask the employers to seek the consent of the employees for this particular purpose. And that is no go, because that will be a very tedious process. As long as you have a few employees not cooperating, it will delay the whole process. So we are not going to collect those information. And so we will not be checking who will have a wage reduction or a wage increase. So that is something that we are not going to monitor. And in fact, the reason we don't want to monitor is also because we can't predict the business in the coming months. Although we hope for the best, but we can never predict. So there may be, for individual enterprise, they may have very strong reasons. They have to adjust their payroll. So we don't want to judge whether that is a reasonable act or not. Otherwise, again, it will be a very elaborate process, and we're not going to do that. And so as long as within the month, they have some pay. They may take a one or 2 days no pay leave, but then they still would have paid in that month. We'll still count that person as a paid employee. Okay, so wage is not an issue, and whether you have, but if you the whole month is no pay leave, then on June, July, and August, that person will not be counted. We only count those who have paid in that month. Okay, we're talking about redundancy. We are not talking about dismissal. But although people will have different interpretation, the meaning of redundancy, formally, redundancy basically means you cut your headcounts with no intention or action to try to refill those vacancies. You can dismiss people, but bear in mind, the advantage of this particular scheme, the ESS, to help the employers to pay their payroll to the employees. But because of that action, the public will have some expectations. Employees will have expectations. Some may not be accurately reflect the design of the system, but they will expect that the employer will treat them reasonably. But just in case, if there's any unreasonable dismissal, so to speak, we will receive a lot of complaints. And the Labor Department has to gear up to tackle this kind of complaints. So I also have to plead to the employers, try not to create all these complaints. And so as long as a very good employer-employee relationship, I expect, in Chinese we say 有商有量. So because of we don't want to judge on whether any dismissal is reasonable or not, particularly within the context of this scheme. Okay, so we are not talking about dismissal. We are talking about headcount reduction. And only that reduction in the headcount, we have a quote-unquote penalty for that number. I guess I answered most of the 4 questions you have raised. Okay.
Well, CK, redundancy and dismissal.
Two separate things.
A company may have already agreed with the staff on a redundancy plan before March, okay? And to be implemented in April or May, agreed. So how would you look at that? Because it's not something that when they made the decision, ESS plan was not announced. So will they be penalized if they continue with their original redundancy plan? This is of big concern because especially with the announcement in the US saying that there may be some change to the trading policy. There may be further headcount cut by Hong Kong companies in order to survive. So I would like you to make a clarification on that. I know penalty is a big concern, and flexibility is another thing that the government can do to help. Together with this, they are very concerned about the MPF status and no MPF status because, for example, when young people that are over 65, they will not have an MPF account, but they are still working with the company. So, like, for example, if a person is dismissed, okay, that is under 65 with an MPF account, and is replaced by a person that is over 65 without a MPF account. So theoretically, the new headcount doesn't count. Is that right? So I have a few questions by members, which I have consolidated and would like to ask you. First of all, if a replacement staff commences duty earlier, so that there is no MPF gap between the monthly payment for outgoing staff and the incoming replacement, will this help? So, this is with the MPF account. If a staff whose age is 65 or above, his MPF account still exists, but there is no MPF contribution from December to March, will he still be counted as one headcount? And if a colleague was on unpaid leave in March, and there was no MPF contribution in March, but there was previously, would this person still count as headcount in March? Let me add one more question that are related to MPF. If somebody owns different companies, okay, and has a job position in all three companies, or whatever, this person also has this person also have different MPF accounts, okay? Does this means that this person is can be counted as three, okay? I know there are definitions, but they are confused. Would you answer those questions?
Yeah, okay, let's try to deal with them one by one. Redundancy plan that was going to be implemented, say this month or next month or even July, but agree earlier on. But that is definitely is up to the company because we're not going to judge on the appropriateness of such a decision or such a plan. We make it very transparent. Whenever there is a difference between the number of paid staff in June, July, and August, comparing to the number of employees in March, there will be a penalty. Okay, that will be a penalty. We don't want to judge on the reason behind, and we're not going to explore the reason behind. So we set a formula with some adjustment on that reduction percentages, so that employers applying for the ESS have to take this into account. Well, it will not cut so deep that you actually would have negative ESS, meaning that you have to, well, in Cantonese it will not be yap yok. So basically it will be a amount. The penalty is almost like a clawback from the original subsidy given to the employers. And given the formula is open, you look at it and see what happened. Whether you can or you decide to get back a few more persons back to the payroll in June, July, and August to keep your subsidy is all up to the applicant to decide. Okay, the whole idea, as I mentioned in the opening, is that we want to maintain the employment. That is the purpose. Okay, that is the key purpose of the whole scheme. If we can't keep the employment, it will not be very successful. And so by construction, that is how we want to keep the employment, at least, or hopefully, as close to the employment in March as possible. Although we know that inevitably there may be a reduction because of if there are continuous stress on our economy. And therefore, we just make it transparent, and you can work that out. For the 65 plus, if they have an account, say they're still open, and if they appear on the record of the trustee given to us, to the processing agent, say in March, they will be counted as a person, okay? And so it doesn't matter because in June, July, and August, you will be, if you continue have the account open, and you show that they have a relevant income in their to the information supplied to the trustees, for us they will be regarded as paid employees in that particular month. And in fact, if for those who are 65 plus, for some reason their account have already been closed, you can always reopen them and to make a voluntary contribution for that reason. And that it will appear on the records of the trustees for the 65 plus. So it's up to you. You know what is counted, what is not counted. And that's the most important thing. Again, about the payment of MPF, it's really up to you to decide when you start paying the MPF, as long as within 60 days. So you pay on the 10th days, on the 20 days, even the first day. It's up to the employers. And the rule, we want to keep it very simple. That is, we just compare the headcount we found in the record for June, July, and August as compared to the record in March. Okay, and that is the very simple, strict rule. We don't want to make it too complicated. And knowing the rules and you know how to adjust, at least not be penalized too much on this particular requirement. So the whole 65 plus is basically the same thing. You can keep them in the records. And if you have information about, let's say you have chosen January as the month to work out the subsidy, and if they are there, they will be counted in the amount of subsidy according to either their relevant income, if you provide those information, or the voluntary contribution you have made, and therefore we will work out the subsidy with that particular employee for the employer. Okay. Now the situation about several companies. Now, there can be the whole unit of application is per employer, okay? You may have 3 separate companies, but each company as an employer, okay, will make an application separately, okay? So if you have 3 separate companies, and each one of them is a legal entity as an employer, that each of the company will apply for the ESS. Okay, but if you have one single employer, but you have 3 separate MPF accounts for your employees to choose, and still the application is per employer. So when you make an application, you provide all the 3 MPF schemes in your application. So we'll merge the information for the 3 different schemes. Like the government has 3 separate trustees for 3 separate schemes, and fortunately, the government doesn't have the right to apply for it. Otherwise, if it's an ordinary company with 3 different schemes, they will have to provide all the information to our processing agent. There is a similar questions, but related to employees. If an employee actually have 3 different employers, and all the 3 different employers have made the MPF contribution, that person will be counted 3 times. But each time is relevant to their own employer in that particular employment, okay? So we don't even know that a person have 2 employers or 3 employers because we're not going to cross-check all those information on an individual basis, okay? There's one tricky thing about companies. Say a mother company has 3 subsidiaries, let's say, and each subsidiary may be an entity in the application, okay? I want to alert employers, you have to make sure, because each one of them is a separate employer. So in the head counts, we only count each employer. But if you have staff movement among your subsidiaries, you have to make sure somehow during this period of you receiving the subsidy, there will be no penalty to be applied in one individual companies. There are multiple methods for dealing with that, like secondment and things like that. And I think that shouldn't be a problem for a company that has a few subsidies. They must have a human resource management department to handle this kind of issues. And I think I have handled most of them, right?
Yeah.
Yes.
Sam, you have anything to add?
No, I think the Secretary's answer is very comprehensive.
Okay. One more, well, actually there are many more questions, but regarding to the temp staff and the permanent staff, actually CK have mentioned it in your presentation, but there are still questions regarding, how to count those. I have one question here from the members. Okay, actually this is from Nigel Collette. He runs a different business. He uses a lot of temp staff, but with contract. So this one, I think his situation may also apply to some of the other member companies that use temp staff. So I'm going to read this out and see if you can answer this question. He said, to apply for the scheme, a company must provide details of the employees for which MPF was paid in March. If an application is made in May and employee numbers then or later fall from the March figure, a penalty will be applied. In this case, he has a large number of employees on short-term contract at the airport, say until start of May. At the time, this doubled their current workforce. The airport authority ended its contract in April. This has so distorted the March figure upon which penalty will apply that the penalty is likely to outweigh any support from the scheme. For businesses that recruit staff on short-term contracts, how will such situation be made compatible with the scheme? Many companies in Hong Kong are like that. They don't use permanent staff, and in the busy seasons, they use short contract staff. So this becomes a problem. CK, could you shed some light to those people that use a lot of short-term staff?
Okay.
Short-term temporary staff.
There can be multiple situations, like you may have a short-term contract, and the contract can be a 1 year, 2 year contract, but probably end in the coming few months. And then actually the contract ends, and the staff contract is very much related to the service contract you make with another company. But let me answer the questions the very first. Firstly, the penalty will never outweigh the support of the scheme. The penalty will always be smaller than the amount of subsidy that is given to you. So that's unfortunately, you lost some of the business in June, and actually the contracts are gone. Okay, so it's not an explicit reason for you to make redundancy, but because simply you have will be considering those factors because you have a contract ended and the contract of your staff tied with that service contract, and they're actually gone. Okay, so you don't need that money because you don't need to support the employees in that particular month because you have such a great reduction in number. Not because you want to cut your numbers, but you just simply don't have the contracts. So basically, the penalty actually works this way: if you have a reduction in headcount, we'll get it back, the money. Okay, so to speak. As long as it's never overweight the amount of subsidy given to you, that is to be fine, right? Now, the whole issue about the temporary staff, that for those who are, let's distinguish two different things. As long as you have a staff, you make a sort of contract more than 60 days, okay? Which is basically an employer-employee relationship maintained within beyond 60 days, they are considered under the law, then you make contributions for the NPF. Okay, so in that situation, they're just one of your staff. For us, we will because we don't collect information on an individual basis, so we don't even know that person actually is coming and going. Okay, we don't have this information. So if you have contract staff, okay, and you have to judge whether you can keep them within the period between June, July, and August. It's up to the employers. Or you just want to give the money back to the government. That's another issue. It's up to the employer to decide. Okay, we're not going to judge for you whether that is thing. But if there are complaints, because some of the contract end actually can be considered as a redundancy measure. People want to fire people without giving good reason, so at the end of contract, they just do not renew the contracts. Okay, and always bear in mind in common law, if that actually, although it's called a contract staff, but as long as their contract has been renewed from time to time and that post is still in existence, then without renew that contract, it can also be considered as a dismissal. Okay, and so it can be considered as a dismissal. Whether it is reasonable or not, that will see up to individual circumstances.
You know, I still are receiving questions or asking you for clarification. Many are still relating to the MPF and headcount.
Yes.
Since only MPF account is taken into consideration.
Also schemes will be included.
But as to the headcount, whether the company, that person has an MPF account or no MPF account, but the headcount still counts, right?
Oh, yes.
Okay.
Well, if they are under the MPF system, if you have a person who have an account,
Right.
let's say in March, theoretically, that person, even though the person for the whole month, they don't have pay, but as long as they have an active account, it's very likely they will be reflected in the MPF return that you're given to the trustees, because they will definitely will seek clarifications. So that person, let's say in March, if they don't have any pay, will still count that number. Okay.
And then, you know, some companies do not do their own accounting. They outsource it. So they do not have a bank account to show the headcounts. Okay. So how would you handle that? You need a bank statement showing all those numbers, headcounts. But if one subcontract out all the accounting, the question is, how should they deal with it?
Well, the headcount doesn't rely on the bank statement. Okay, we don't check the bank statement. We don't actually check the transaction in the bank statement. All we want to know for the bank statement is the name of the bank account number and the correct bank number, the account number. Okay, that's what we need from the bank statement. The information about staff, about salary, all comes from the MPF trustees. Okay, so that is the information we base on, and they are all historical by now for December to March.
Well, actually, a few of our expert members asked the same question. If an expect employee who are under lockdown wherever they are, and they are unable to come back to extend their work visa, are they covered in total headcount of the subsidy calculation?
Well, again, go back to the basic. In terms of the month, the specified month that the employer choose for working out the subsidy. So whatever information there, they work out that subsidy. So that is the basic of the amount of subsidy working on the specified month. In terms of if we call it the headcount control, we count the number of employees that you provide to the information to the trustees in March. And then we look at June, July, August, okay? And we'll just compare those numbers. So if you do have an employee who will not be able to come back, say in June or July and August, but they are actually here. I don't know why, but they're actually here in March, and they have an account entry in your NPF contribution. That headcount will be counted in March, but if you can provide an entry for that, the persons are kind of, even if they are unable to come back in June, July, and August, and you give them a paid leave, and they will appear in the records, so they will be counted. So that's the whole idea. If you have, with the reasons, we compare the two numbers. One is on number of employees in March, but number of paid employees in June, July, and August, not only to keep the employment, but to keep the employees with pay. That is the whole idea.
Well, thank you, CK. Actually, many of the questions I have asked you, and you have given me, you have clarified my questions. This is an occasion that we can share information with our members. Maybe you can ask one of your staff to station here and answer the questions. There are still many, even though they may sound simple, but our members, they are all very honorable members. They don't want to step into a criminal situation, okay?
Well, as long as they don't lie, it's no criminal offense. As long as they are supplying the information in good faith, it will not be a criminal offense. Yeah. The penalty is on the amount of subsidy that we have given out. So although we call it penalty, is a way that telling people try not to. But somehow it can be inevitable because of the change in circumstances and factors that employers may not be able to totally control.
CK, before we close, I still would like to read this out in Chinese because there are a few questions which actually I think you have answered, but I would like you to, if possible, give a short answer in Chinese to these members. 佢哋問佢有啲中小企咧，佢哋想申請呢個計劃，僱主咧就根據個要求咧就要承諾咧就不裁員嘅嚇。但係如果佢哋真係捱唔住，咁期間咧佢哋可唔可以係要求減薪或者要求啲員工放冇薪假，或者重組佢哋嘅架構？所謂換血啊，其實佢哋講咧，佢哋話我哋都係想生存啫嚇。正話你都講啦，佢哋最緊要佢哋唔係講大話，唔係欺騙啊嘛。佢生存，但係喺呢個計劃裏邊咧有咁多要求嚇，咁佢又想生存，點樣可以攞到個平衡咧嚇？或者可唔可以答一答佢哋咧？
實個要求得兩個啫喎。第一咧就係我俾幾多錢你。喺第一期，你就使晒啲錢喺啲員工嘅身上，呢個第一個要求。第二個要求咧就係喺6月、7月、8月，你唔好有 redundancy。又或者如果你個 headcount 係少咗咧，我哋就會扣翻啲錢，罰翻啲錢。咁就係呢啲咁嘅要求嘅啫。正如頭先所講咧，我哋係唔會去睇個薪酬嘅，我亦都唔會睇佢呢個月翻幾多日工嘅。咁所以即係我哋數嗰個咧，亦都係好簡易地去睇咧，就係我淨係睇6月、7月、8月佢嘅受薪嘅人數是否少過3月份受聘嘅人數。咁呢個如果少過咧，嗰個方程式就係先即係你嗰個嘅即係攞嘅資助啦，嗰月份嘅資助啦，就乘以嗰個嘅百分率，即係個人數嘅減少嘅百分率啦，再乘一個你叫做折扣啦，由10% 去到80%，大機構就會高啲，即係個折扣就低啲。當然倒翻出嚟講嚇，咁即係佢就要罰8成，一個細嘅微企咧，佢就係會只係罰1成嘅啫。咁所以就係即係資助乘嗰個人數嘅減少，咁所以唔係好太複雜嘅啫。咁人工我哋係唔會去處理嘅。實際上大家知道咧，當個經濟唔係太好景嘅時候咧，如果我哋從一個宏觀嘅政策咧，我哋寧願咧係有啲 job sharing 咧， 係好過有啲人有工嘅人冇工嘅。咁所以呢個就由翻個別嘅僱主咧去處理，即係佢點樣處理佢啲員工嗰個安排啊、工作啊、薪酬啊等等嘅。
其實咧，佢哋都係要求啦，即係希望政府可以人性啲去處理，即係樣嘢咧，如果係根據嗰個字眼去做咧，佢哋係有啲擔心嘅。Actually, many members would like the government to treat this process, treat the process humanly, because according to the requirements, members has expressed some concern because of the economic situation, and if they have to adjust their headcounts to keep the business afloat, they would again they would like the government or the implementing agency, SAM, to take it. Again, I use the word humanly, not just according to the book. Of course, legally, we have to do certain things in response to our society's expectation. So this is what our members would like to see. And also, there are still questions. There are still questions that I'm unable to raise today for the members, but we will pass on to Sam. Maybe you can help to answer one by one.
We try our best, yeah.
Yeah. Well, I have to say that one of the key features of this ESS, we want to make it very simple, straightforward, everything transparent, and so that we can start the process very quickly, start the applications, and then provide the subsidy. That is so we can't keep it very individualistic. I can definitely assure the design of the whole system is trying to make it so simple, and we do take into account the unforeseen circumstances that business may be facing in the coming months, and we do appreciate the challenges that people are facing within the economy. So we want to help the employers to face this downturn, but we also appeal to the employers to help the government, to help the society to maintain employment as far as they can. And the constraints are given in the formula given and the commitment they have made.
Okay. Well, thank you. In the current climate, it is especially important that the government remains alert and utilizes its reserve to protect the local market. As the saying goes, where there is life, there is hope. We are hoping and expecting the government to stay with us and help us, give us a helping hand along the line. It's not going to be easy the rest of the year. So, but we sincerely hope economy would turn for the better. So everybody.